Okay. Good afternoon, everyone. We are starting Interreg project's session on business model canvas. We've had some technical difficulties, so we have to apologize, but I hope it will not delay the quality of the presentation being delivered today. Today's topic is business model canvas, and my name is Arvidas Bložė. I am partner at evergrowth.io, which is a growth consultancy agency being kind of developed from Startup LT, which is a business accelerator under a venture capital fund called Practical Capital. So naturally, helping startups, we shifted towards a consulting business on B2B, especially for B2B startups in terms of growing and scaling a business model and testing initial assumptions on business model. So I think we'll skip the introduction and move straight to the point. So today's topic is business model canvas, which is intended to help early stage startups to structure the idea into an actionable plan. Okay, and a bit of a trivia, if you will, to kind of get into the topic. So the origin of business model canvas is not so old. Like Lean Startup or any movement, it's pretty new and being widely adopted in accelerators. And the main guy behind this concept is Alexander Osterwalder, which started this movement, so to say, publishing his PhD thesis called Business Model Ontology. Business Model Ontology is not a super catchy name, as you might imagine, and basically it did not pick up much interest, of course, but Alexander packaged this into a very interesting product in the form of a book, a very visual book, not like a typical management book where you have a lot of texts and so on. So he started. He basically transformed his PhD thesis into a visually conceptually oriented management business strategy and management kind of guidelines, and called Business Model Generation. And just I would recommend to read the story about how this book was published, because it was pretty interesting that they kind of skipped the traditional publishers, and they did a kind of a small crowdsourcing or crowdfunding from adopters or contributors that wanted their name to be in the title of a book, like in the prior, like a contributor to the book, and being like name published in the book itself. Okay, so it was pretty interesting to spread the word and also raise some money for a designer to make this book visually nicely. So in a way, he used this business model canvas himself in publishing the book and getting the movement started. And now the method or the framework described in that book was called Business Model Canvas, and it is now widely accepted as a Lean Startup framework, and as I mentioned, being used in a lot of accelerators or overall framework for turning your idea into something, like testing it and getting it into actionable steps. So that's about the trivia. And before we delve deeper, there's usually a bit of confusion on business plan versus business model. Okay, and I think it's very important to start by thinking why are they different, and why, for example, some parts of it are not relevant for startup. Okay, so business plan is a set of documents prepared by a firm's management to summarize its operations and financial objectives for the near future, and usually it's 1 to 3 years, and to show how they will be achieved. So you can already see that in the business plan definition there is already certain keywords like management, operational financial objectives for the near future, and it's 1 to 3 years, and how they will be achieved. So if you kind of think it's more like waterfall planning, right? When you kind of usually have some backlog information, or have some financial information, operational information that you can extrapolate from, and to show that you can actually achieve it, extrapolating from past performance. So business plan is usually like a 30-40 page document encompassing financial, operational, risk assessments and whatnot, and then intended to be addressed to financing providers, to shareholders, to partner firms, or so on. It has a purpose, and it's very comprehensive. And And while a business model, if you will, business model is simply describing the rationale of how an organization creates, delivers, and captures value in economic, social, cultural, or other context. What does it mean? So instead of writing how you will achieve it, how you will employ resources, what kind of return will you get, and so on, business model is simply try to define what enables it to create value, deliver, and capture. So it's not only creating and delivering that is kind of interesting, but also the capturing part. As we talked in the previous sessions, it's capturing is very important, because creating value can be pretty easy, right? I mean, you can get the product below your cost of sales and just be, probably creating value for your customers, but capturing not. So business model is just simple explanation how your economy is working. Okay, so business plan is a plan and model is a model in that sense, and probably the differentiating factor is that startups model while companies plan. Okay, it is a very important kind of framework that business model can be put into a single diagram of your business. Okay, like one glance, and you kind of can understand that we are creating this product through these channels and so on. Well, business plan is a document investors make you write that they don't read. Okay, so basically everyone asks, send me a business plan, and they read the executive summary. So that is why for startups it is really irrelevant to come up with business plan. And if we switch to business plan and startup angle, so probably by the time you draft the document, by the time you finish the document, it might be already irrelevant. Meaning that as an early stage startup, or once you have an idea, you cannot really create a 3-year plan, all right? Or it takes like a month to draft a document, but if you're testing your assumptions, probably you can go to the market and understand or validate certain assumptions, and then you probably are not even you might be wrong on some of them, and all your financial model and resource employment plan is kind of just falls apart, right? So instead of concentrating on this drafting this big document and learning tomorrow or a week or a month after drafting it that it doesn't make any sense because some assumptions are wrong, it's just a very empty exercise for startups in that sense. Some might argue that actually if you cannot draft a business plan, you're not good at all. But I think for early stage startups especially, which is I think that also the target audience for this program, drafting business plan is not a priority. Okay, and you should be more focused on what we call business model. Okay, because business model needs to be tested like the product. Usually what happens that a lot of companies or startups or just entrepreneurs, right? They think that they need to test the product, okay? But actually you need to test the business model, because the product, you might fix it, you might make it better, you might make it somehow work. It's just a matter of resources. While business model is just how you create, deliver, and capture value, which is very important. Okay, you might have a very good product, but wrong distribution channels, wrong customers, and so on, and you might not being able to capture or create value or simply like deliver the value. Okay, so that is why prior to investing a lot of resources and building an amazing product, you can test actually business model, and you need to test business model. And when you talk with the investors and when you talk about fundraising and structuring your idea, it is actually you have to sell them business. You don't have to sell investors product, you have to sell business. Okay, and you have to sell them some kind of potential return in the future and so on. So that is why just simple business model can prove that you are learning from failures and see how, and investors or ever stakeholders can see how you iterate, for example, right? What's your learning curve? How you went and tested assumptions prior to building product or prior to building or acting on business model and building a company based on what you learn. Okay, so that is why business model needs to be tested. It is very important, and it needs to be tested. It is sometimes more important than the product, because when you're fundraising and when you're trying to structure your idea, you have to make sure that you can create and capture value. Okay, and then business models it usually is not very unified for a single startup or for a single company, because it can differ to different customer segments. Okay, so sometimes you might have direct sales for one, and for others you might have like a inbound approach, and then you can charge a subscription, and then you can upsell the others, and so on. So it is also not like carved in stone and fixed in stone. Okay, so again, for startups, business model make more sense, and you should be very much focused on validating your business model prior to investing a lot of resources. And then it is the best case when you can show to your investor or show to your potential investor that you can actually save resources. Instead of building stuff and knowing why it doesn't work, you can actually kind of save resources, test the assumptions, validate business model, and only then go into the market and deliver. Okay, and business model canvas is something that is defining business model, right? Because it has create, deliver, and capture value is very wide understanding. So business model canvas, or Dr. Osterwalder, what he proposes is to kind of have a structured approach, a single reference model basically, okay, for how do you structure your ideas on business model. So it is based on similarities of a wide range of business model conceptualizations. With this business model design of business model canvas, an enterprise or any startup founder or entrepreneur can easily describe their business model. So imagine like a one canvas, one kind of page document, or just a simple write-up where you can, in 1 minute you can understand what this company is all about. Okay, not delving deep into the team or whatnot, but really how they are making their business model work, where is the revenue coming in, and so on. And when you dissect the business model canvas, you can see that it is built around nine pillars, which is a value proposition, customer segments, channels, customer relationships, revenue streams, key partners, key resources, key activities, and then of course the cost structure. And if you will, how does it look? It looks like a pretty simple canvas where these 9 building blocks are allocated, and then you start basically writing down as a team or yourself individually. You have to start writing down your assumptions there that you later on need to test and verify and update. So it's not supposed to be like carved in stone, because I don't know if you can see, but there's on the top right corner there's a version box written there. So it is supposed to change, and change in business model reflects your understanding about your business, right, and ability to validate and move forward. So it is usually you're not gonna get it right from the first time. That is why it is important to be a live document for your team, and that is why in most of the accelerators you can see that every team has a board with business model canvas laid out on it, and there's a lot of stickers on that board. And everyone is kind of every week or every end of the week they are trying to do the sprints where they update the business model, their understanding. In a week you can have a lot of validation of assumptions, and then you must reflect it of your understanding of your business model. Okay, so this is how it looks like, and now we'll try to go through the individual blocks and kind of talk what you have to put in there, and what kind of questions you need to ask yourself as an entrepreneur to fill it in. Okay, so first of all, it is value proposition. Okay, so you might start from different blocks, but kind of we in our process we prefer to start with value proposition. And what you need to ask yourself is what is the client's problem and how frequent and painful it is for the client. Okay, so it's not your understanding of a problem and how you see the world, and for example you might think that I have this problem, so everyone should have this problem. So this is the first kind of false negative. So you must not assume that it is your problem and everyone should have it. Okay, you must verify that the client has a problem, and you must know how frequent and how often and how painful, how much resources, wasted opportunities he has. Okay, so it shows that you understand what kind of value you propose to your customer and on what terms. Okay, so it's also important to think about how you alleviate the pain, okay, the problem or the pain, and what is the meaning that you make, what value do you create. Okay, so it is also very important. Do you unlock some resources? Do you create new resources? Are you like a add-on? Are you a painkiller, or are you a vitamin, or are you simply a plug-in to the business that is nice to have? How many people are using it, using for strategic decisions, for day-to-day operations, and so on. So it is very important to understand and to demonstrate where the problem is coming from, how the customers are handling it right now, and how often do they have it, or what kind of value they unlock with it. Okay, and then also it's very good to understand how the kind of your proposition can be measured, and can you calculate return on investment for the client, for your product, and so on. So meaning that you really understand the client process. Okay, and cheaper is not a sufficient value proposition, because it's not only that you provide cheaper services, because once you do it, is only a matter of switching costs, or because there is no loyalty, only switching cost. So being cheaper is a very temporary arbitrage, unless you're 100 times better. So that should be your kind of understanding. Am I creating attacking with my product an existing market, so I should be 100 times better? Am I attacking kind of with my product, am I resegmenting the market, meaning I'm creating some niche product, or I'm creating differentiation by niche, or differentiation by basically segment. So meaning that, for example, there are some incumbents that are very expensive, and there are smaller clients that simply cannot afford it, and then there's a market to serve for those smaller clients. And then of course it's completely product for completely new market that no one knows about it. Okay, and then you have to really this is the core box, I think, of all the business model canvas, where it defines what meaning do you make for your client. Okay, what do you do for your client exactly, and be very honest to yourself. Are you a problem solver for them, or are you just a nice to have thing? Because it later translates to other part of business model. Because if you're a problem solver, you're probably very hard to switch, you're probably charging quite a lot, and you're a very integral part in the client system. Okay, but again, just a remark, you should not focus on product or service, nor have a feature pitch. Okay, it should be irrelevant of your product and your features, what you have. It should be simply the value for your client. Okay, the value proposition for your client. So it was a first block overview, and then we'd like to and that block could be called the benefit. Okay, if you will. So value proposition block is the benefit, if you kind of think about this. Okay, then the second block we can cover is the customer segments. So you need to ask yourself these questions and try to write it down. Okay, for whom are you creating value? Who has the problem? So think about what type of companies. Okay, what type of companies? Is it a company? Is it a person? Is it some kind of association? So on. So you have to resegment it. Okay, and to do this properly, you have to provide attributes for your customers. Okay, so this is something that we also covered in the previous workshop, is that you have to provide customer profiles for your product, because it can be very different profiles based on size, vertical, geography, operations, and so on. Okay, it can be if you talk about business clients, if you talk about customers like private customers, it can be age, gender, location, activity, and so on. So you have to be able to segment your clients and really narrow down your customer segment into some specific attributes. Okay, and then also be able to demonstrate who is willing to pay, because it might be that it's not the client that is paying. Okay, it should be very clear, and it should be multiple customer segments, because you might, as you develop your startup lean, it can be that you start with a very small segment, okay, and you monopolize it. You are the best. Simply, you tailor kind of approach to all single client. You really make sure that they extract the maximum value for your product. But then you must know that it's not enough. You should have more customer segments. And this value proposition comprised with customer segments kind of shows investor or even yourself that you have a deep understanding on the market and how it works and where is the value created and for what kind of customers. Okay, so it's like first block is benefit, so then second block is who can have this benefit. Okay, then let's switch to challenge. So when you think about the channels, you also have to ask yourself questions: how the customers will get to know about your value proposition. Okay, what are the touch points for interaction with the customer? Is it direct or indirect? Do you own the channel? Like, are you targeting them through advertisements yourself? Are you targeting them by cold emails, cold calls? Are you targeting them somehow through content marketing that you create? Okay, or are you targeting them indirectly? Indirectly meaning through distributors and other partners. So it is very important to write down these channels. And if you are already in operations for quite some time, so you should be able to also ask yourself and write down which channels work best, which are the most cost efficient. How are these channels integrating with customer routines? Okay, because you must capture customer in his work when he's making the decision. Okay, it might be kind of a pretty gruesome process to get to onboard the client. Okay, and then very also important to map out value chain of the market and all the stakeholders, and identify who can be your agents, distributors, who can facilitate the decision, and so on. So you should make sure that you map out complete value chain of interactions with your value proposition and your customer segments, and you should be able to link them perfectly. Okay, so this is like just writing down, brainstorming quite a lot, looking for best practices, and writing down the direct or indirect channels that you think might work for different customer segments. So this block is called interaction. The next block is customer relationship. Okay, so here we want to kind of describe what kind of relationship does any customer segment expect us to establish. Okay, so it is important that you have to kind of, based on your value proposition and overall business model, you have to have certain relationship with your clients. Okay, so it is like transactional interaction, long-term interaction where you have your key account that you nurture. Is it personal assistance? Is it like self-service or automated service? Are you building communities around, like many marketplaces are building communities around to help them interact? Are you having co-creation, whereas, for example, you utilize your user-generated data and you kind of push it through your content marketing effort? Okay, so you expect your users to create a lot of data. Or are you just simply trying to integrate deeply and have a very high switching cost for your clients? Okay, so this is also very important to map it out, these kind of interactions that clients are expecting from your kind of value proposition. Okay, so think about this and think about what kind of customer relationship, what kind of customer relationship you have to really build with your client to match their expectations. Okay, and relationships, of course, are established through channels. So it also very nicely corresponds into a coherent flow so far in these 4 blocks. And the relationship aim itself, to build a relationship, is to acquire a user, to acquire new users, okay, to retain them, or to boost sales or to upsell. So they have a purpose. It's not just that you want to, call and say hi, but you have to have a very specific goal for these relationships, and then you must package them into this transactional, automated service, community engagement, and so on, to serve a purpose of acquiring, retaining, or boosting sales. Okay, we're not doing charity. Okay, we're trying to make a business. Next block is revenue streams. Okay, and this is something that how you are getting paid. So to really understand the revenue stream, you don't just put your random assumption that we're gonna get this cut from transactions, but you have to think through the client perspective again. For what value customers are willing to pay? Okay, and it serves a potential for product packaging, because product can be bundled and packaged in many ways to different customer segments. Okay, so different customer segments probably can have or are willing to pay for different value. So you have to be able to identify it and really package it accordingly. So some pricing plans might be cheaper, some are higher, and so on. And revenue streams also correlates with pricing mechanisms. So you can price it very differently for different customer segments, and and the feature products that you package together. Okay, and revenue streams, like the business model is kind of it's already invented. Okay, so you don't have to invent something new. You just have to assign one of them. Is it asset sale, like any e-commerce shops or online books shops, or even like brick and mortar shops? They're selling an asset, so you're acquiring a title ownership of an asset. Then you have a usage fee, for example, that you pay based on usage data. You have subscription, whereas you subscribe for a service and you can terminate, but then you pay probably for a quarter in advance or a year in advance. Lending, renting, leasing, licensing, brokerage fees from transaction cut, and advertising, and so on. So these are kind of revenue streams that you have to think about and package accordingly to your customer segments through relationship and interaction. Okay, to pay for the benefit that you provide. So this concludes the kind of the front office, okay, if you will. So the benefit, the customer segment, the channels, customer relationships, and revenue streams. So this is what is client facing. Okay, so this is something that you propose to the client, and this is the front office and the first part of the business model canvas. The second part is the back office, and we'll go through it right now. So it's key resources, key activities, key partners, and cost structure. So this is something that you have to have as a company to be able to serve your customers. Okay, what kind of partners, activities, or resources you have to secure and maintain, and what kind of expenses you have to incur to deliver this value to your customer to deliver the value to your customer segments through established channels and relationship to get money paid. So key activities is the block in the kind of back office, if you will, that we'd like to start with. And you have to ask yourself a question: what key activities are required by our value proposition? Okay, distribution channel, customer relationships, and revenue streams. So we are here talking very generalistic terms, so very broadly. So do you have to have a production line or a factory or simply like assembly or any kind of assets behind your business model? Okay, do you have to kind of have problem solving, like on-demand engineering team to go and maintain and so on, just people? Or do you have to have a platform or network, and software falls under this part? So do you have to have something coded, like a platform that you are selling access to the client? Okay, so this is the key activities that you must understand. Are you producing something? Are you providing a service? Or are you providing like some kind of platform software that is also a service? So it is not a very broad box, but you have to understand what key activities are you performing to deliver. Okay. The next step is key resources, or the next block is key resources. So again, think of it like what key resources are required by our value proposition: distribution channels, customer relationships, and revenue streams. Okay, so what resources do we need to have to be able to provide it? Physical, intellectual property, human, financial. If you're a bank, you need to have, for example, of course, financial resources, a lot of financial. If you're a lending agency, a lot of financial resources. Okay, if you're a software company, you have to have human capital. Okay, so programmers and probably IP, protected by IP. If you're a licensing company, of course it is IP. And then maybe you have to have physical assets if you have some retail store operations or retail operations or brick and mortar operations. Okay, so again, what kind of key resources are required by value proposition, distribution channels, customer relationships, and revenue streams? Okay, because revenues also has to come in through like cash in a cashier, or like a PayPal accounts or something. It has to be right. So you just map it out and write it down. Next block is key partners. So it is basically network of suppliers and partners to make business model work. Okay, so because if you're manufacturing something, there has to be a supplier. If you are basically distributing something, you have to have partners. Okay, so in a sense, is what key resources are we acquiring from suppliers? Okay, and what key activities are partners performing for us? So meaning if you are distributing, so distributors are your main partners, okay? But if you are, for example, a factory, then of course all the like materials assembly, it might be even the leasing of premises, it has to come from your key suppliers, okay? So it has to be there. Think about it from this angle, and also like it's pretty standard, or it is already mapped out what you have to think through, like in what kind of logic you have to think when you talk about this box. So it is like optimization and economies of scale. So meaning that you can kind of optimize and achieve better pricing through your economies of scale. Okay, are these partners or suppliers helping you to optimize and achieve economies of scale? Are they sharing risk and uncertainty with you, or are they helping you to acquire a particular resource and activity? Okay, so some partners are intended to scale. Okay, some partners are intending just to provide you with some resource, and some partners are kind of intended to reduce the risk of your business. Okay, so that's why you have to think about in this kind of perspective. You have to assign certain attributes to your partners or suppliers to understand what kind of role do they play. Okay, so really map it out nicely and really understand why is the supplier or partner critical, and attributes assigning through optimization, reduction of risk, acquisition of particular resource and activity. And the last block is cost structure. So it kind of covers or what you can think when you're addressing this box is most important inherent cost. What key resources are most expensive? What key partners are most expensive? This is cost or value driven. So for example, you might say that we are changing partners or suppliers to optimize the cost, or we are simply focusing on growth, right? And we're ready to pay upfront, or we are not minding the higher probably amount of payments to our partners or resources, okay? So it's also very important to understand. And basically cost structure is economies of scale. Okay, so are you scaling and you are having better unit economy or better economy when you increase your production? Economies of scope. So for example, your marketing team can service 5 or 6 different products, and then you're simply trying to expand your product range or scope and kind of have lower resources. Then it is fixed cost. What kind of fixed cost do you have? So staff cost, I don't know, like renting an office and so on, and variable cost, like what is changing when you increase your volume of operations. Okay, so then just map it out very nicely and thinking about this kind of dissection of your underlying cost structure. So why are you incurring this cost, and why are you, for example, paying more or less? And because you want to, that be value driven or cost driven, or you have to simply your product, for example, retail price is fixed, and then you just simply cannot increase the price so easily. So then you try to actually be very cost minded, and then you're very cost driven, so trying to very carefully plan your resource, your batch production, or simply resource planning, versus value driven, where you can simply put this price increase on your customers pretty easily. Okay, so this is the business model canvas. And for closing remarks, probably I would say that this is an exercise and discussion between team members that should be very detailed and in depth, and it should, the team should go and drill through all these questions and the mindset behind these blocks. It's because in many ways, in many presentations, you actually can sense that it is very superficial. But actually it is not superficial at all, and if done right, it serves its purpose. And however, end result, or what you actually put on the board or what you present, should be not the all discussion that you have with your team, but actually only the highlights, right? So less is more. So you can put like one sentence, but behind one sentence it could be like a month of assumption testing and validation. Okay, so again, looking at the business model canvas, one outsider should understand how your business model is working. Okay, so you should not overcomplicate it, but the analysis behind is very in depth, and you have to iterate, search, and validate before building. So meaning that it's pretty cheap exercise, just thinking about it, validating, testing, calling, talking with customers, and put learning back to the business model canvas. Okay, and when you think about it in a very structured way, why are you paying for this? Why do you have to have this relationship? Why are we having this relationship through this channel with this client and so on? So then it is really easy to understand when something is not working, that you need to tweak something. Okay, and just in real life, how it looks like this. So basically it is a team effort, big sheet on A0 paper on the wall, and everyone's full attention there, and kind of combining. So it's not some online document or some some piece of paper that you put in a drawer. It should be up, it serve its purpose, and it should really be focal point of your idea validation. So this is it for my part. Thank you for watching. We'll take the questions later, and now my colleague Jean-Baptiste will probably continue on 7 tips how to get the first customer for now half an hour, and then we'll take your questions. So I'm switching. Thanks for watching, and see you later, I think.
All right. Hello everyone. So my name is Jean-Baptiste, but you can call me JB. It's just much easier to pronounce, and you actually save a lot of time as well. I am also the co-founder of...
I will switch back to the camera. I want to look at that screen.
So look at that screen? Oh, okay. Yeah. Okay, are we good? Okay, so hi everyone. Hi everyone, my name is Jean-Baptiste, but you can call me JB. I'm also a co-founder at Evergrowth. We are a growth agency, so you just met Arvidas. Yeah, so we are both partners in this venture. We have both been working with early stage startups, accelerators, and myself I've been involved with B2B sales, and I mainly help startup for the past 3 years to go to market with data-driven sales. And today we're going to talk about 7 steps that you can use if you're a B2B startups to get your first paying customers, and you can do that as fast and as cheap as possible. Yeah, so this is about us. Arvidas did a quick intro already, so I'm going to fast forward this part. But long story short, we have growth agency, we come from VC, and we have a team of consultants helping us to do that. We mainly help startups to get seed funding on what we call bridge round as well, before they qualify to get a bigger round of funding. The main thing that we help them to do at this stage is really to go to market, and we do that as cheap and as fast as possible, and that's what we're going to talk today in those 7 steps that are actionable and you can use right after the workshop. Eventually the main idea when we achieve to go to market is to be able to repeat it, so we can claim that we have product market fit. Then we also help startup to fundraise the next round, Series A, B, C, and we either stay involved there or just our job is done eventually. And when we stay there, we actually help them to scale, to eventually get to optimize. And now we are lucky enough to after 3 years working with some investment to already work on some potential exits, and that's where also Avidas is very involved. But today we're going to talk about those 7 steps. So the step number 1 is actually very logical. You need to define your ideal customer profiles. So that's what we also call ICP. So when you are in B2B, you have 4 elements of the ICP profile. The first element is, of course, what we call the company. It's very straightforward. It's a lot of common sense here, but eventually you need to define in which region you will target the companies you want to offer your product to, and then you can categorize them in group of industries, in group of verticals, sub-industries, and so on. And eventually you have the size. So size is a very important criteria, and it can differ according to the industry you are targeting. So for example, let's say one of you is targeting e-commerce shops. The most important size criteria when you are targeting e-commerce and you don't have much data available to understand how big they are or not is actually not the number of employees, and revenue is not always public according to which market you target, but the very nice criteria that you can use to categorize e-commerce shop according to their size is actually Alexia ranking. And Alexia ranking is it's a public ranking. You can of course access the database, but you also have some Chrome plugins that you can install on your browser. And what it basically does is it's just ranking website according to their traffic, and lower the ranking is, higher the traffic is. And then I will just use this as an indication of more traffic they have, more orders they would have if they are an e-commerce shop. Then again, if you target, for example, mobile app developers, the number of employees again doesn't matter. The traffic of their website is irrelevant because most of their users and most of their growth is actually related to their mobile app usage. So what you want to use in that case when you are targeting app developers is on iOS stores you can get information about the number of reviews they might have. On Google Play Store you can actually have even the information about the number of downloads, and this gives you a much better indication of how big the company might be according to the number of users they have, or how big the evaluation is, or how big need of technology they need according to the number of users they have on their mobile app. So I think you get the idea. And then of course in many cases number of employees is a very good criteria to understand the size of the companies, especially when you sell software, because number of employees can be a good way to assume if they have between 11 to 50 employees, then they most likely going to have at least 1 salespeople. If they have more than 50 to 200 employees, they most likely going to have at least 5 people. And you can make the same conclusion for other roles in the company, like customer support or even HR. Like you could make a very simple assumption that any companies with more than 50 employees start to have HR department in-house, right? And so on and so forth. So those criteria regarding the company are mainly used for really understanding and categorizing companies according to vertical and size. And you can use this as well later on to buy databases or do some web scraping to generate lists. But that's not the topic of today. So the main idea now, we want to focus on building your ICP. So once you have nailed the company part, you need to switch on start focusing on people, because eventually, yes, we target companies, and of course you will categorize your different ideal customer profiles that we call ICPs into different categories of companies based on all these criteria, but eventually you will sell your product to people. And when we look at the people, we categorize people in 3 main categories. So we have the first one, which is decision makers. It's very straightforward. Those are the people in your companies that are able to make a decision on purchasing or at least giving a green light on getting your product used in the company. They have people working for them usually, and those people are what we call influencers. Influencers are actually not always able to take or make decision, or at least the final decision. Finally, we have the internal champion, who is actually working for the influencers. And for every single profile, decision maker and actually influencer, we make a list of KPIs. So we make very simple assumptions that any companies have KPIs for any type of decision maker or influencer. So any job title in the company is related to some KPIs that they have to reach, and those KPIs are business oriented, and if they are not able to reach those KPIs, then eventually they will be in trouble, right? And if they reach those KPIs, then they can get their bonus faster, or they can just get to keep their job, or they just can go home earlier and watch more TV. It doesn't really matter, but we just want to list those KPIs because later on when we talk to them, we want to show that our product can help them to reach these KPIs, right? And just to make sure we're all on the same page, if we have some very early stage startups here, KPI stands for key performance indicators. So that's what you are measured on in your daily activities or weekly activities, whatever, in your job, to make sure that you are performing. And then eventually those KPIs are related to some pain point, and that's what we want to list here. So either you know the market very well, either you have been in this position yourself, and eventually you are creating a product that help you to be better at your job, and in that case you can very easily start listing those KPIs. And if you are not sure, a very, very good way to actually identify those KPIs is usually to look for job ads. So let's say now I'm targeting, software companies or marketing agencies, let's say in Europe. Then I will just make a list of marketing job ads for marketing agencies within Europe. I will use different type of job portal. And I'm targeting decision makers, or let's say I'm targeting SEO specialists, or paid ad specialists in these regions. And I want to target medium-sized companies. So what we'll do, I will look for paid media or paid traffic specialists in these regions that are working for marketing agencies. And then after reviewing 3 to 5 job ads of this job title that you want to target, that you think are influencers, you will be able to see patterns, and you will be able to identify those patterns and make conclusion that if everyone who is recruiting this type of specialist is actually looking every time to have this and this and this responsibilities for these people, this must be a valid KPIs that I should list. And then eventually the main idea is to see later on if this KPIs is related to one of the problem you want to solve. But focusing on the ICP, this is pretty much how we categorize the contact. And then finally, regarding the internal champion, we do not really make list of KPIs of the internal champions, because no matter what you want to do in the future with your sales process and how to get your first customers, it's always a very, very hard sell to sell to the internal champion, because eventually you might need to sell from the bottom to the top twice. So that's why we focus on spending time on mapping and documenting the decision makers and the influencer mainly. Then eventually about your product, because this is what you want to offer to these companies and to these people. And we categorize products in 3 main categories. So we have the first category that we call a painkiller. A painkiller product is a product that we can actually easily calculate the ROI on. So meaning, like, if you invest in my services or product, within 2, 3, 5, 6 months, you will get your money back and start making profit, right? Very, very simple calculation. So you can try to do this with your own product, try to break down the pricing and see how much hours the company you will sell your product to will save and what is their cost per hour. That's a very easy ROI calculator that you can start building now. And eventually, if you're able to do that, we could assume that you have a painkiller product. The other category of product is a vitamin. And a vitamin product is, you might also be able to calculate the ROI. The only difference is the time you will save on with this product will not be for the decision maker, but will most likely, or for the business in general, but will most likely be only focused on the influencer itself. So you will have a vitamin for the influencer, but not a painkiller for the whole organization, which is also very, very good. And there is many very good vitamin out there in the market, but it's a different value proposition, and the strength is also different. Meaning that when you have a painkiller product, you can usually approach decision maker straightforward, or you can even target decision makers, because they will understand that this has a strong impact on their business, which is and their KPIs are most likely related to the bottom line of the business. And even though they won't be the one hands-on this product and testing it or implementing your services or product, they will be the one referring you to the influencer. And from that moment on, you will have authority on the influencer, which is a very good place and to be, and also that you can leverage. Then eventually a vitamin is a great product, but you will need to target the influencers because the decision maker won't get your value proposition at that plot. And then eventually the plugin is one of the most difficult products to sell being proactive, but meaning that this will not solve direct KPIs of the decision maker of the influencer, and this is just a nice to have self-service type of product. So then when you're done categorizing this, we'll move to the last part, which is the deal breakers. And deal breakers can be different for many ICPs, but a very, very simple explanation of what is a deal breaker is, for example, you are selling a product like a hardware, and your product hardware can only work if you have internet connection. So any deal breaker will be like if this company will use your hardware in a venue or a place, a location where there is no internet connection. That's a deal breaker, and you need to make a list of those. Switching costs. You need, for example, if they are gonna replace something with your product, or if they will replace a team, people, services. So this is switching costs. It doesn't have to be costly per se, but just people are in general very not eager to change something that they already have in place. So it's going to be a bit more difficult in terms of expectation and how to move this forward. So then when you start doing this, you will see that very, very soon you will be able to even map different ideal customer profiles. So you usually start with one, and then eventually, for example, the first way you could split your ideal customer profile is by size. And then you can categorize them by small, medium, and enterprise companies. And then eventually you will realize that according to small, medium, and enterprise, like large companies, you will have different ideal contacts with different job titles and different companies, different KPIs, and the value proposition strengths of your product might also be different. So that's the step number one. And then part of the deliverables of this workshop, you will get a template that you can use. You will get some guidelines that just sum up everything that I just said. So feel free to download this presentation afterwards and to use these guidelines to create your first ideal customer profiles. Then the step number two, which is actually also very, very important if you want to stay focused and go with the step-by-step process to get your very first paying customers, you need to brainstorm with your team and list your assumption. But that's a very, very dangerous place to stay. So you need to do this in a structured way. The first step when you do this brainstorming to categorize your assumption is actually to list your assumption is actually to categorize them. And we can usually categorize assumptions in three categories. So the first one is problem, the second one is solution, and eventually the last one is implementation. And a good way to do this is to use simple sentences that are very easy to understand for your team and your co-founders. So for example, if I want to make assumptions about problems, I will use a sentence like that. I believe that ICP, so ideal customer profile that I define, it could be ICP1, ICP small enterprise, ICP whatever name you give to this ideal customer profile, has a problem with achieving KPIs XYZ. And this is how you will list the problems, because you want to stay focused and understand clearly what is it that you think you will solve. What problems do you think they have? And then the next step is the same with listing the problems that you think they will solve, and be specific and try to quantify how they will be saving time, for example, or how they will be saving monies, and focus again on the KPIs and pains that these people have, because eventually this is where they will have this trigger to buy your services or product. And then the implementation is, how are you going to do it? So we believe that we can actually achieve this solution by implementing a solution like this and like that, right? So for every assumption, you need to categorize them in those three categories and define what will be the success criteria that you can measure to say that this assumption is verified and this was correct or this was not correct. So the first one is, for example, how many meetings I can get with people that have these problems where I can pitch this solution together with this implementation. The other one could be, how many actually pre-orders will I get, and what will be the success criteria that this assumption was correct, we verified it, and or this assumption was not correct, because that's the main idea here. You want to go from assumption to verified or unverified as fast and as cheap as possible using this 7 steps program. And then eventually you want to see if you were right about the assumption, so how fast can they actually, is the solution really solving the problem you said in these ranges that you have predefined? And you want to be able as well to measure that, right? And then the step 3 is to build your MVP, what we call minimum viable product. And then there is also some simple steps that you can follow to do this effectively. So this is actually a very interesting part that I get often very interesting feedback, but it's actually okay to build stuff that doesn't scale. Yes, because most likely you will crash it anyway. So the point of an MVP is not to be super sexy and to be very robust, because most of the time what you want to achieve is to get a yes or no, that you are able to move forward to the next step. So it's okay to build stuff that doesn't scale and then scale it later once you see that, or improve it later and hire more people later once you see that people are actually buying your minimum viable product and they are happy with it, right? And sometimes really like a 10 slide deck is actually good enough. So it's actually good sometimes just to have a backend infrastructure that mostly work with spreadsheets and show to the clients a presentation, and instead of selling your product, you can actually pitch your vision. And this is sometimes good enough. I remember actually this startup in Copenhagen, like this was before the Uber time, to give you an idea of their MVP. Their solution assumption was the same as Uber, that when you are requesting a taxi, you don't want to call and you want to get the taxi that are the closest to you and blah blah blah. And so they launched this app that was grouping a bunch of taxis together, and this was much easier to get the taxis next to you. That was the very proposition for the users, and that's the assumption they wanted to verify before to spend time on building such a sophisticated system like Uber. And their app was very simple, and actually every time someone requested an Uber, it was sending them in some kind of live dashboard a notification that someone requested a taxi, sorry, not a Uber. And what they were doing is they were manually calling every taxi companies and getting the taxi companies that was the closest. And of course it was not scalable, but it just confirmed that their assumption was actually correct, and it was a good idea to actually raise money and make this startup happen. Then Uber came in and they finally failed, but that was a very good execution of a MVP. I hope you get my point. Then, when you do it, just keep the details. I don't know if some of you knows the KISS rule already, but the main idea is to keep it simple and stupid, so your mom could get it, right? If your mom could get it, I think you have a good MVP. You don't need a fancy design, we talked about it already, and focus really on what matters to solve the problem. Try to categorize all these features that you have, all these super nice ideas, and try to cut them down as fast as possible to make sure that you only focus on what will deliver the most value to your client in the MVP, right? And can you ship it in 1 week? So if you're able to do that, that's great. We will move on to the next step. If not, just go back to point 2 and keep on cutting what you don't need in your MVP. Then the step 4 is actually very, very important. So you need to be proactive. It's not because you have launched your super cool product and services and you have spent some time on designing who are your ideal customer profiles and doing as fast as possible a good enough MVP to launch to the market. You still need to be proactive and get your first initial clients. And the step number 1 is very simple. You should be able to leverage your network. I mean, if you go usually today on LinkedIn and you are launching your very first businesses, you must be able to filter your first degree connections and see who of your first degree connection is actually working already in ICP companies, and if they are working as the contact that you usually want to reach. And if not, ask this connection to actually refer you to the second degree connections working at the ICPs, and use this to really leverage your network. It's a very, very powerful way to start. Then of course, if you want to go step by step, again, you don't need to build like stuff that will scale on some kind of very sophisticated sales system. What you need is, for example, to do a list of the top 50 customers that you would like to pitch your services or your product and your ID to. Then eventually there is many blog posts, podcasts that are documenting how to use LinkedIn and how to use many different tools to guess their emails or to guess their phone numbers and how to get in touch. You can even send email on LinkedIn. the main idea is you need to have these top 50 companies that you want to target and leverage your network extensively. Do not underestimate that part. Then eventually you need to outreach them, you need to contact them, you need to be proactive. And you can do that by calling them. You can just call your first degree connection. You can also call companies. We'll talk about this in a bit. It's very important to contact them, call them, or send them email, but do not pitch yet. Your main goal at this stage is to book a meeting where we will discuss the next step and eventually discover their pain or understand to verify your assumptions, right? You need to be brief and focus on your goal. You need to book a meeting with them. And then eventually, are you able to do this? Are you able to leverage your network to book meetings? If yes, that's great. We can move on to the next step. If not, there is not many conclusions we can make. But the first conclusion is go back to step one. Redesign your ICP. You are most likely working in the wrong industry. There is no pain there, or maybe you are just trying to solve a problem that you don't understand. And maybe you are doing well, and then we just need to improve the way you outreach. That's what we'll look at in the best practice. And so to contact them, there is not hundreds of ways. So of course you can start. You can be creative and like send postcards or send message on like direct message on Twitters and so on. But let's say the most common way to contact people, especially in B2B, is actually either to call them if they are small and medium businesses, and you can do that, and there is many ways to do it in a good way. We'll discuss this in a bit. It's also very good if you target ICP companies in your top 50 list that are actually not in your region, to have a native speaker in your team that will be able to actually speak the native language directly with them. It's always an advantage. It's not a must-have, but it's an advantage. And then eventually, of course, if you target very big companies, then enterprise companies, it's sometimes way more efficient to send cold emails to them. But then, of course, there are some best practice, and that's what we're going to talk about. Right. So the goals of this step, just to again make sure we are aligned on where for you to focus, is to requalify this ICP, meaning that it's completely okay to just see that you were wrong and this type of companies are actually not matching your ideal customer profile, and that's okay. And you need to book a demo call. So you don't need to pitch yet. And even though they will reply to your email and so on, the main point here is to not sell by email. You want, again, to book a demo call, and if they start asking questions about your pitch and so on, you probably have a very, very good first outreach, but you need to either go on face-to-face meeting or just jump on the phone to get much more feedback, and especially at this stage, align their expectation on what you have. So we'll discuss this a bit more in the next step as well. And these are the very simple best practice when you do cold calls. So for example, you have your list of top 50 companies that you want to approach and you want to get your first meeting. You can be very tense. I mean, it's a very scary task sometimes for some people, but then remember, you have spent some time on doing your ideal customer profile. You have spent some time on listing your assumptions about the problems they might have. You have probably done some research there, talked to some first degree connections, and know you want to call those other companies, and you have researched them on LinkedIn, so you have done your homework. So you should be actually excited and to contact them and verify your assumption. And then again, remember, what you want is just to book a meeting. You don't want to sell something to someone that doesn't need anything yet at the moment. So, and a good way to do that is actually to smile before to dial, because it will actually give you authority. If you call people and you have tense in your voice, they will have authority on you, and they will feel that the only thing you want is to actually hang up the phone as soon as possible. So smile before to dial. It's a very simple trick, but it helps you to feel more confident. Do not pitch the gatekeeper. So, you know, we usually call the gatekeeper this person who is in charge of filtering the calls in the company. And guess what? This person also have KPIs. So it's very, very important to respect that this person has very important KPIs for the company. This person needs to filter the calls that are actually useless for the people you might want to talk to. So what you want to show is that you have done some homework, and that you have some assumptions, and you have to put this person in charge. Ask how can you talk to this person? How can you verify your homework if this person starts giving you objections? And then you can use social proof to give credibility. Social proof could be that you are an expert in this industry. Social proof could be that you already have X and Y, Z clients, and so on and so forth. And don't forget here to acknowledge that this person is in charge. And then the last trick I can give you, especially if you target small and medium businesses, is actually to call after working hours. So in the Nordic, it's most likely going to be after 5 or 4 p.m. And then in Southern Europe, for example, it's more after 6 p.m. But eventually the gatekeeper will simply be at home, and the decision maker will most likely be able to pick up the phone because they might see this inbound calls from clients. So this is how to deal with the gatekeeper. Do not forget to shut up every time you ask questions. So it's very, very important. Like, people tend to forget that silence is one of the most powerful tools that you have whenever you're actually talking to people, because silence are very embarrassing, especially over the phone, and this is actually forcing the other people to talk. So whenever you ask questions, mark the silence after your question. Do not say in your first call. We talked about this. And then challenge your prospects. So eventually you are getting to talk to the decision maker. Your first goal is actually to book a meeting. And they are telling you to send an email to discuss about the meeting later on, and so on and so forth. And instead of just taking the emails and getting out of the phone, because this is what they are doing this because it's working for them. People that are getting this very, very poor call by very poorly trained salespeople that are just very, very selfish. Usually when you ask them to send an email, they will just take your email and just hang up the phone. And you don't want to be categorized as the same category of salespeople. So the best way to do this is to, like every objection, acknowledge the objection and say, of course I can send you an email. What is your email address? And then eventually when you get that, you just simply ask, what else? What do you want me to send by email? And by asking these questions, you actually show that you want to create value. You don't want to waste their time on sending them what they do not care about. And you might even start some very valuable conversation like, I don't know, what do you do, right? And then you shortly explain again what you do, what is the goal of your call, and why you want to book a meeting to verify some problems that you think you can solve. This is a very, very good way to handle this type of objections. So do not forget to challenge them if you get objections. Now talking about the other way to actually outreach people is with the cold email. So this is a screenshot of a tool called Yesware, where you can send cold email campaign with automatic follow-up. So what we are looking at is, for example, I'm not sure if you see the mouse, the cursor on the screen, but here the first step is actually what we call the intro emails, and then the second step here is the first follow-up, the second follow-up, the third and the fourth that will be sent if those people do not reply to emails. Here we are looking at the number of recipients, here that's the open rate, and here we are looking at the reply rate, and finally here we have the bounce rate. So when we use tools like Yesware, and there are many tools like Yesware today out there that can do this, send mail merge with automatic follow-up, we actually look at this type of criteria to measure our performance. And here it's a very, very well performing cold email campaign where we actually get above 75 open rate most of the time. We're actually close to 80% on average, and we get from 55 to 47% reply rate. So again, close to 50% reply rate, which is very, very high. On average, B2B companies get between 8 to 10%. And we never actually track the click-through rate, so that's for a click we have 0%, so we actually never put that much links in cold emails, but even if we will do, we'll never track it for two very simple reasons. First reason is it actually increases your chances to go to spam, and it increases also the chances. I mean, we believe people are just not stupid, and they can see that when there is a link and it's tracked, they are being tracked, and usually they don't like that. So that's why we have 0% on this column click. But then just the best practice for you to follow. So your email subject has to be aligned with the content of the email. Don't trick people with false leading subject like RE, where they might believe that you reply to one of their email. This is very, very bad practice. You want to make sure that the first impression you give is not that you are tricking them, right? Then the content itself of your emails has to be very short. 7 lines is really the maximum, and the rule less is more definitely applies here. What we can see when we send email campaign is it's very hard. It should be possible to measure it accurately, but what we can see definitely is that a lot of emails that you get are actually firstly open on mobile, and then eventually people reply from computers. And we all do this. We open the emails on mobile and we either delete it, archive it, or mark it as unread to reply later. And this is the first filter level. So you want to make sure that the email you sent are actually fitting on your mobile screen. I usually always take we send the email to our mobile and we just make sure that it fits on the mobile screen before we shoot the campaign. And then the best trick, really, the best feedback we can give you, or you can give to yourself, is when you read the email out loud. So what you want to do is you want to see if this actually feels like a face-to-face conversation when you are reading the email out loud. The scenario we like to take is, let's say you are doing your research of your top 50 companies that you want to target to verify your assumption. Remember the step number 2. And for some reason, all these companies, or most of these companies, are going to a trade show, a conference, and then eventually you meet one of these contacts that you look up and you were ready to contact. You meet this person next to the coffee stand, and read your cold email and saying that you are right in the front of this person and you are talking to this person. If that doesn't feel and look like a human conversation, you probably have the wrong template. And how to do this? You actually need to count how many times you are briefing him when you are reading your email out loud, and you just need to make short sentences to make sure it does feel and look like a human face-to-face conversation. You need to focus on one value proposition, one pain per email. I know you might have a lot of assumptions about how many pains you might solve and so on and so forth, but when you do this cold call or when you do this cold email, you need to really try to focus on one pain point when you are doing one outreach. It's of course valuable to map and link pain point with social proof, and then you need to show that you have done some homework. So if you have researched them, just show it when you contact them. Simple call to action in every email. So basically, when you send a cold email and you have a question at the end which you can reply by yes or no, you have much higher chances to get reply. As simple as that. And then the only time when we put another question in the email is when we ask for referral for the decision maker. So we will ask, for example, do you think this could be of interest to your company? And if yes, can you please put me in touch with the right person? And here's an example. I mean, I highly recommend to not copy paste all the templates that you find over the web, but you can try to customize a template like this. After this will be part of the deliverables, and for your information, we had a 45% open rate on this template and we had an 18% reply rate. Of course, it took time before to get there, and we were much later stage than just verifying our assumption, but here are the quick insight that our subject was not false leading, was straight to the point. We added this one because we got some hate reply, and then the people like, how did you get my email? I don't like cold email. And just by adding this, people got softer at giving us feedback. Here, this was our homework that we were showing that, look, people working with this type of expertise, which was basically the type of KPIs people were called responsible or job title, and are in industry are using your company name to verify this, and then that's why we put the pain related to their KPI or value proposition, and then eventually link it with a reference, which is a social proof. And here, please do not say we save time and money. That's the place where you are very, very precise, and you say we help professionals like you, blah, 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 to solve KPI X in 1 hour instead of 2 days. If you can do this, just say it like that. It's much more easier. They will understand that they save time and money, but it's much more easier for them to understand. They can picture it and they can relate to it. And then simple call to action that they can reply by yes or no. Then again, after the workshop, you will get this presentation and you can actually download templates and make sure you also validate the 6 point on this checklist that you need to have in every email, which is a homework, assumption, painkiller, your secret sauce, which is also your elevator pitch. So how do you do it differently? And the question, can they reply by yes or no, right? And then step number 5. So we are 3 steps away from the last step of how to get your very first customers. And then of course, to get your very first customers, you need to get your very first meetings. And then when you have your very first meetings, you just need to make sure that you're not going to screw them. And how to do this is to follow these very simple steps. So you need to do your homework. So you have done it, of course, before to contact them, but eventually you get some people that agree to meet you. You need to do homework about their companies, even more homework about themselves, and have a list of very specific questions for every single meeting you're going to have. For example, you can have pain-oriented question to confirm your problem assumptions. You can have process-oriented question to confirm your implementation assumption, that this is a good way to implement a solution, and then be flexible. And if your assumptions are wrong, that's not the end of the world. You just need to change your assumption, go back to step 2, and either verify it again or change the other assumptions, and eventually what we call pivot when you use this lean methodology. And remember this rule: if you are talking more than 20% of the time, especially at the beginning when you are selling or pitching, you're talking to your very first clients, this is wrong, right? So you need to make sure that they are talking 80% of the time when you are listening. And please do not explain your questions. Like we said, when you do cold call, it's very important that when you ask your question, they have to be clear enough, very precise, and shut up after your question to make sure the other person is eager or willing to talk, right? Use silence to make people talk. So very simple trick. Again, I put it there. It's very, very powerful. Are your assumptions confirmed? Yes, that's great. Let's move on to the next step. If no, either you go back to the first step, you are targeting the wrong ICP and you are talking to the wrong person or the wrong company, or it might be also that you just go back to step 2 and make some new assumptions. The companies are good, you are just making wrong assumptions, and you really need to talk to those people again with different assumptions that you want to verify. And you might also do it wrong, and that's why I've put some best practice and some guidelines that you can follow and download from this presentation. But then eventually, within the same meeting, once you are done verifying your assumption and asking all your questions, that's the time for you to pitch what you do. And remember that they might have complicated problems, but your solution has to be simple. And that's why you only need to focus on the problem that you have identified and just bring benefits for these problems that you have identified, and focus only on those ones. Don't start pitching all the other potential benefits that your solution or service might have if they only talk about 2 problems or they confirm 2 assumption problems. This will be much easier to really touch this pain point and get their attention on if your implementation or if your solution is actually valid enough. Remember, at this step, what we want, especially when you want to get your very first customer, is really to verify your assumptions. Skip unrelated features and then confirm that or not when you get this at this step, if your assumption was correct about that the solution might actually solve the problem. So if you identify problems and you have another assumption that is related to this solution, if you pitch it, then don't forget to ask if this makes sense to them and if they agree that this can be a good solution. And then of course the second thing that you can also leverage is paint the picture. So instead of taking this random presentation that you have for every single client, try to take again what you have learned about when you ask them about the process they use, about the KPIs they are responsible for. You might even ask them how a typical day or week looks like in their job. Use this to also leverage your pitch and paint a picture, saying them like, you see, you're telling me that when you are doing this, you are doing it like this and like that. With our product or services, this will actually happen like this and like that. So you're actually painting the picture of your implementation assumption and see if they actually get it. And best case scenario, they will actually continue to paint the picture you started, and that's when you're actually doing a great pitch, because they are even pitching your idea, your assumption to yourself. And then very simple step. You want to confirm your assumption, and your assumptions are related to creating a business. So next step is, would you buy it today for this price? And if yes, that's great. Let's go and ship it. That's the next step and the final step of this 7-step process. If no, just ask for feedback. What do you need to improve? And see which assumption you were missing. Go back to step 2 or 1 according to if you are targeting the wrong ICP or if your assumption were just wrong. Yeah, that's pretty much it. Then these are some best practice that you can follow. So to really structure what we call the discovery demo call meetings. So we have 4 parts. You have the intro part that that we did not describe, but that's where you basically have this small icebreaker when you enter the meeting, like very, very short, doesn't have to be more than 1 minute really. And then when you have the call or the meeting agenda, which is very, very simple, you just ask their permission to actually ask questions about their potential problems, their companies, and so on. And I tell you what, you never get someone who's telling you, no, you cannot ask me questions. But by asking this question, can I ask you questions, you're actually saying that this is the agenda of the meeting, and you're actually also in a way taking control of how the meeting will be run. Again, we talked about this. You verify your assumption, you do your homework, you have a list of questions, and eventually you do the demo. So this is just a more structured way that you can use to prepare every single meetings, and then the next step are pretty clear and straightforward at this stage when you want to get your very first clients. So again, there is some guidelines that you can download from this presentation after the workshop. And then the final step. So the final step is ship it, ship your product, ship your service. It's an MVP, it doesn't matter. But there are a few things that you need to focus on, is the expectations. Again, they might be super excited because you are solving a problem that you both agreed on, and at least your assumption was correct, and that's amazing. But remember that the stage of your product is very, very early stage. So it's very important to set very low expectation that yes, you're going to solve this problem, but the experience might not be optimal, and they need to agree with that. So you don't want to load some kind of support issue with one client that you cannot support. So it's always better to not promise features that are not in your roadmap. It's okay to be open with the vision of your roadmap, but do not commit on features delivery if they are not there and you are not actually able to do it. And it's better to always actually over deliver than under deliver. Just keep this in mind as well. Use the feedback, of course, to prioritize your roadmap. So according to what your clients that are actually paying, your first paying clients, if they're telling you I would love to have this, to do this or that, really leverage this feedback to prioritize the roadmap instead of making new assumptions based on some ideas. This is real fact. This is from people that are paying for what you do. Use this and keep this lean approach on developing your product. You need to talk to every single client. And eventually, guess what? Many early stage founders and companies are forgetting to ask for referral. So you get your first clients, they're super happy, they feel that they are actually leveraging some kind of innovative tool to solve problems that they were not able to solve before. Ask for referral. And once you get referral, go back to step 4 and book meetings, right? This is the basic summary of the steps that you can use as well when you want to go to market or when you want to get your very first customers, following those very simple steps, right? So thank you for your time, and if you have questions, I think we might have a Q&A now, and you can of course contact me on LinkedIn, Twitter, or even shoot me an email. I'd be happy to get back to you. Thank you. Hello again. Sorry, I was not sure how to check where do we get questions. So we are back. I see.
Yeah.
What is more important to have? Well, actually, the first questions, like to have MVP or full canvas models, as you may have been noticed when we were doing both presentation, they are both complementary. It's not like, will I choose this or that? It's actually very valuable to do both of those exercises. And what are the fundamental steps? That's actually what we went through, the 7 steps that we just looked at. So I guess this question was asked right before we did that part. And how to know does my solution really fit my customer? So if you look at the steps that we looked at, so you will be able to know this when you get your first meeting in step 5, basically. And can you last question, Arvidas? I guess this one is for you.
It's like, do you need to put canvas, business model canvas to pitch? No, you don't. You don't. Actually, pitch meeting is a bit, or pitch presentation is different. Many topics can be overlapping, but it's more of focusing on problem, value proposition, underlying technology, or underlying magic, if you will, team, current status, financial projections, and the kind of fundraising and where you want to go with a roadmap. So in a way, it's like more related to actually what kind of next milestone you want to achieve, right? And business model canvas is more internally to kind of develop your idea or validate your core assumptions and update the business model accordingly. So I would say it's very good in boot camps, in accelerators, in this early stage. But for pitch, it's very different. Pitch is solely like where you want to go with the business, like what kind of results you want to achieve in 6 or 7 months, what is the burn rate, and so on. So it is more different topics. But business model canvas helps you to kind of structure the pitch deck for sure, and many topics are overlapping. Okay, and we have did you cover this? What is more important?
Yeah, I covered those are 3 questions.
Okay.
There is some more. Okay, you can scroll down.
No, but I think that's it.
Okay.
And you said this, right?
Yeah.
Yep. Fundamentals targeting, how business solution with customer. This is it, or
Good question.
yeah? If you have any more questions, you can shoot it and we can answer. If not, we can call it a day with some delays on the technical side. Still, we managed to deliver the topic. Okay. Okay, so what? That's it. Thank you all again. Thanks for Interreg for organizing this and actually being bringing this resource for you to explore. And I think we'll have some more webinars coming in November, and then some workshops also planned. So stay tuned in that sense. Okay. So thank you and goodbye.